Cancer is a club you may never want to belong to, but you find the most amazing people when you do. That is a quote from my guest today, Erica Campbell. Erica Campbell has a group of women who bonded over their breast cancer journey, and they deeply understand the challenge of navigating health challenges, wrestling with mortality, and building resilience strategies. If you have or know anyone who has had or has been affected by the cancer, whether it's themselves or somebody in their family, you do not want to miss what Erica has to share with us today.
Have you ever felt like giving up, quitting, throwing in the towel? Welcome to Never Ever Give Up Hope featuring Carol Graham. She's an author, health coach, and motivational speaker. Backed into a corner multiple times in her life, Carol shares with you stories on how she overcame some of the toughest obstacles a person can go through in life, but refused to give up hope. Rather than admit defeat, an opportunity was presented, and it involves each and every one of you. Carol will feature spectacular guests who will share their messages of hope, encouragement, and their inspiration to prove why life's adversities only make you stronger. And now, welcoming the host of the show, here's Carol Graham.
Erica Newbert Campbell is an award-winning writer and longtime cancer advocate who speaks the vocabulary of cancer. I love that. From multiple perspectives. Erica is a breast cancer survivor who lost her mom to the same disease. In her debut memoir, The Mastectomy I Always Wanted, that really hit me, as I'm sure people do a double take when they read that. In her memoir, The Mastectomy I Always Wanted, Erica combines authenticity and vulnerability with practical advice for the mastectomy journey. Welcome, Erica.
Thank you so much, Carol. And I really deeply appreciate that just warm and inviting welcome and introduction.
So take it away. Tell us your story, Erica. Start from the beginning.
Well, I think it's really interesting when you opened up with my bio and you talked about having multiple perspectives and the vocabulary of cancer. And I think that's kind of where my story begins, in that I've had that vocabulary of cancer because of three things. Number one, I call myself sometimes a cancer orphan, meaning
Ah,
that, I lost my mother to breast cancer and I walked beside her in that journey and I learned all of these really deeply personal and technical words that surround the cancer space. So that's one perspective. My second perspective is that I'd worked with children with cancer in a volunteer and a professional capacity for nearly 25 years. And again, walking
mm,
beside all of those different families who are facing probably one of the most unimaginable crises in their life and learning all of their journeys and stories. And then the third perspective is my own. So combining the first and the second led me to the third, which is when I ended up with my own breast cancer diagnosis and then
mm.
having to take all of that learning, all of that vocabulary, all of those experiences into one. It made me feel like I was in this incredibly unique position, as somebody who probably knew more about cancer than most, but then also felt it maybe a little bit more deeply and personally than most. And with that perspective, I was really reflective on my journey. And, now that I'm on the other side, have really dedicated most of my life to sharing that with others.
Wow. Tell us a little more about your story. What you
Mm.
went through, the fear, the trauma, how you
Yeah,
coped, etc.
yeah. As I mentioned, my mother died of breast cancer about 20 years ago. And, I held her hand as she took her last breath, right? So that is something that I define as a life-changing moment for me. And I carried it with me for many years after that. And as you could imagine, after seeing her struggles, that struggle became my own fear. And what I mean by
Right.
that is I was terrified of getting breast cancer myself. I never wanted to go through what she had been through because I had been so intimately involved in her care during her journey. And with that, I put myself obviously under high scrutiny, meaning I got regular mammograms. And, Carol, I'd often go and get what I called scary mammograms. The kind where the technician comes in afterwards and sits you down and says, well, we think we see something. We're going to
Oh,
bring you back for secondary screening, right? So, yes, I did my regular mammograms, but I was also subjected to secondary ultrasounds, MRIs over and over again. And that caused such anxiety over
oh
the
yeah.
years, right? And they would always say, well, we think we see something. So this dark cloud hung over me for a strong 15 years.
Oh my goodness.
And, I'd had all those secondary follow-ups. I kind of got used to the technician coming in and saying, we have to do additional screening and come back in a week. And I got used to it. And I made a joke once. I said to one of them, I said, I have been so heavily screened and you guys are so concerned. Why don't I just wish that someday I could just preventively have a mastectomy so I don't have to subject myself to this much more. It was kind of a joke, that sort of moment, but it sort of rang a little bit true. And sure enough, Carol, after 15 years of all of this screening, I finally, on a Friday afternoon, sitting at my desk at work, after waiting a week for our biopsy results, I got the phone call. It's the phone call you never want. It was 4 o'clock on a Friday. My phone rang. I knew it was the doctor's office finally. And when I answered the phone, they said, are you sitting down and do you have a pen? That is not the way you start those conversations.
Wow.
And so, I kind of, it was a moment that I felt like maybe I had been waiting for 15 years, but it still hit me like a brick. When the physician said that you have cancer, I mean, I thought I was strong. I thought I was ready. I thought I was prepared, and I wasn't. And all of those fears and anxieties and all of those things I thought about in my mother's journey just came flooding in as if it was, a dam had broken. And I just thought that maybe this was the beginning of the end. So for me, obviously, it was a physical journey at that moment, right? I knew I had to do something with my health, but it also became a mental journey, right? And equally, both of physical and mental became very important as I struggled in those first early weeks, waiting to understand what to do and how to do it and how to tackle this. And oh my goodness, right? It was something I really had to evaluate of how I was going to go forward with it. And so I started that process. And I met with lots of physicians, and a traditional sort of option that many women get depending on your diagnosis. I always say I'm not a doctor, but a lot of times you get to choose between sort of a lumpectomy as a surgical choice, where they just take out the lump where your tumor is, or a lot more aggressive, which is a mastectomy or a double mastectomy when they're removing all of your breasts. And I came to that decision point with my physician, and it was probably, I think he said to me, it's the fastest somebody has ever decided. Um,
Really?
yeah. He said to me, he said, which are you going to choose? I said, well, I'm going to choose the mastectomy, double mastectomy. He said, well, are you sure? Because that is, an aggressive option. And he said, you might want to think about it. And I said, I have thought about it for 15 years,
Oh my goodness.
and I would like to do this now and right away because the buildup of the anxiety and the fear had become so overwhelming that I wanted a way out, and that was the way I felt it was the best for me.
Wow.
It was,
What stage of cancer were you at that point?
I was actually very early stage. So that's where I'm going to sidebar reminder for anybody listening. Highly encourage early detection and regular mammograms. If you haven't booked yours, book it now. Pause this recording and book your mammogram. Um, but I was stage zero. It was called DCIS, which was ductal carcinoma in situ, but it's caught inside the ducts of the breast. And so they were able to have it contained. So I could have had probably a less aggressive option. I could have just had them take out that tumor that was within the milk ducts of my breast. Um, but I thought long and hard about this. And like I said, I sound really confident now, Carol, but I was terrified. I was extremely concerned about my long-term survival. And I wanted the most aggressive option, even though I knew that it was probably the hardest option, right? That's the hardest thing in life, in anything.
Right.
When you
Right.
choose the harder option, because it's for the long-term gain, not the short-term avoidance of pain.
And
Um,
when was this? How long ago?
Now it's been 8 years. Eight
Wow.
years. Yeah. And I can tell you this, success story is if I want to shorten it, I did have that double mastectomy and I had reconstructive surgery to really make me feel like myself again. And it took a very long time and it was very painful. And I am very happy that I have done that journey. And it's like one of those things where I would say it took a solid year, a whole year to physically recover. But now obviously I am cancer free and I can't have a relapse of breast cancer because I don't really have any breasts. Um, but I also have freedom. And what I mean by that is I have freedom from the anxiety and fear that I had before. And that is priceless. When you think about, how you never want to give up, it's about the physical resilience and grit. You have to get through that. But it's also the mental obstacles and facing a fear and facing the harder and more challenging course for a long-term gain. So I really, I felt very, very grateful. As I mentioned, when I got the phone call, I was at work and I'm working full time. So a few weeks later, I was in a team meeting and I had to announce to my full team that I was taking off time for a double mastectomy once I had chosen that. And very tearful, everybody at work was really sad and supportive. But after the meeting, there was a woman who was new in our office, new to the team. I barely knew her. And she pulled me aside and she whispered, she said, I've had a same surgery 5 years ago. And I looked at her and I said, are you sure? Because she looked beautiful. She looked whole. She looked healthy. And she said, yes. And do you want to see my breasts today? And I was like, okay, hold on a minute. In my mind, I'm thinking, this is work. I have to be professional. I don't know this woman. This is probably strange, but yes, I do. Right. And so we found a bathroom, like kind of in the, dark corner of the office, locked the door. She took off her shirt and she looks so real, Carol. Her breasts
Oh,
look so
really?
real. Oh my gosh. And her scars are so faint. And I mean, I literally could not believe that she had had a double mastectomy. I could not believe that she had had reconstruction. It was honestly mind blowing. And that to me was such a gift. It was such a gift to actually see in real life what it would look like in my future. Because they tell you all these scary things as you're talking to a physician. And I remember saying, well, do you have any photos of what this is going to look like? He's like, well, no, I don't have any photos. Here I am in this bathroom at work with the actual being able to see the results. And it was such a moment of, vulnerability from this woman,
Uh,
such a gift. And, I felt so grateful because it gave me hope. And then, I made a mental note to myself to say, this is something so rare. Like the universe sort of put me in this right position, right time to have this opportunity with this very generous woman. And I made that commitment to myself that I wanted to pay it forward someday. So I started to take photos of my journey before, during, and after this surgery because I wanted to be able to do that for other women in the future. And that's kind of how I have produced a book about it because I really wanted to give that experience I felt was so rare and so vulnerable and so generous. And I really wanted to share that with other women.
so what was besides fear, if I'm hearing you correctly,
Yeah.
why did you not consider other options first, such as chemo or radiation?
Mm. Well, chemotherapy, all of those were options. Chemotherapy, as you know, has many significant side effects,
Right.
and it's very toxic on your body.
Right.
And then radiation, it is easier, quote unquote, I'll put that in quotes, than a chemotherapy, sort of injections. But it is still radiation to your skin and to your body, and it can have significant side effects, including, sort of scarring and burning on your skin and just the toxicity of those radioactive waves. So those were options for me, but I thought I got the choice and said if I did the most aggressive surgical option, I could avoid those other options, if that makes sense.
Yes, it makes total sense. And did you get grief about that from anybody, including family or doctors?
Huh. How did you know, Carol? Um, yeah, I mean, that's the hardest part is having to trust yourself and trust the decisions that you've made. Because I definitely got, sort of the raised eyebrow from several people questioning your choices. And you really have to be grounded in your decision. And that's what I had to do. But once, I got through that the first couple times, people said some weird things to me. That's the one thing I would say. People do tend to, they don't know what to say in front of a, cancer patient or new cancer diagnosis. So I did have some people who were super helpful, some people that maybe weren't. And that's okay. Everyone has their
Right,
strengths and weaknesses.
right. I have a quote here from you I'd like you to expound on. And you said, "You are not alone.
Mm.
Initially, it may feel that way, but you will attract people meant to support you and walk beside you. It may take a while, but there are people who care and want to help. So be rigorous in your search for the people you need. Knowledge is power, and community is contagious."
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. Thank you for reminding me of it because, when I was first diagnosed, I mean, there's thousands of women in the US that are diagnosed every year. But I will tell you, I felt incredibly lonely at the beginning. I thought there's nobody else who has the same diagnosis, who also has kids, who also works full time, or who also has a husband or whatever, who also, lives on this street. Whatever it is, I felt like a victim in the beginning. I
Right.
felt really, really alone. And, like I just told you the story of the woman at work, so that was the first person I had met that had had a similar diagnosis. And, again, I was just found myself in this unique situation. I was able to attract the people that I needed in that moment by simply being vulnerable and sharing kind of what I was going through. And then over time, people came out of the woodwork. Hey, my neighbor's been diagnosed, or my neighbor's been through this. My sister-in-law, you can talk to her. And, over time, that community did become contagious. And I found today I have a powerful group of women who have all been through a similar journey. We call ourselves breasties, we're like besties with breast cancer. And it is. Cancer is like a club that you never want to belong to, but once you get there, you meet the most incredible people because you've had to face that mortality. You've had to face these incredibly challenging, life statistics and choices. And it opens up such connection and vulnerability between humans. And that's been the silver lining in all of it. That feeling that I remember feeling so lonely at the beginning. And now today, I feel so supported. And as soon as I hear of someone else that's diagnosed, I immediately want to welcome them into that community
Mm,
and make
mm.
them have that experience of feeling less alone as well.
And here is another quote that I'd like you to expound on. You said, "During my journey, I sometimes gave myself 24 hours to wallow in sadness or grief. And then I forced myself to do anything that felt like the right next best thing. Even tiny actions like brushing my hair or walking around the block would create a great sense of accomplishment. When self pity crept in, I quieted my mind and I listened to that tiny voice inside of me to find the next step. I learned that even the smallest amount of patience and progress could bring hope.
Yeah. That one, empirically, I knew at the start of the journey, and and I mean any journey, any life challenge, it comes down to mindset. I mean, even the
Right.
simplest terms of, do you look at this glass half full or glass half empty? And that's, you're sort of like, deep down on your bones, that's the right thing. But you also have to be real with yourself and recognize and acknowledge the really like tough emotions. And I think I would have been inauthentic with myself if I had been all sunshine, roses, and glass half full all the time, because that wasn't the reality. So putting a timeline on it, you know, uh, saying I could wallow in just a pity party of one. I would say, pity party of one, like I would let myself have that like ick feeling, the kind where you just want to lay on the couch, put your head under a comforter, never get up. Like you kind of have to go through that because if you deny yourself that, it will probably just get stuffed down and come out sideways other ways. But then I said, it's really, once you're in that place, it's really hard to get out of it. It's really tempting to just keep wallowing in the self-pity and the victim and the sort of doubt. So, getting out of that and making the mental choice of like, okay, it's been 24 hours, it's time. But everything seems so overwhelming when you start to come out from under those covers or whatever, mechanism you use to kind of really feel the pain. And it was really just what is the next right thing that you can do. And if it is as simple and as small as taking a shower or brushing your teeth or brushing your hair, like it's consistency and small actions that actually add up. I mean, I'm sure Carol, you or any of your listeners have been through something really hard. And it's not been this bold, big one moment that probably snapped you out of out of a challenge. It was probably the cliche phrase of one foot in front of the other.
Right.
And there were days I definitely was like, oh my gosh, my biggest achievement is I walked to the mailbox,
Mm.
and back, or I was able to put something in the microwave, like, and that's okay. That was the place I was in the beginning. My doctor and I joke, right after my surgery, I was in so much pain, Carol, so much pain. And I don't mean to scare anybody, but it is, it's quite significant. I could not bend my arm enough to actually itch my nose. I had to ask the doctor to itch my nose, and that was real. Yeah, it was really real. And then today, years later, I am back to full health, and I was able to pick up my kids and toddlers. I can carry groceries. I can exercise. And he jokes. He's like, "Remember when I used to, itch your nose?" And now it's, you look back and you think, I didn't go from not being able to itch my nose to, carrying a small child in my arms. It was incremental, small baby steps every day.
And how old were your children at that point when you were diagnosed?
They were young. They were 4 and 7. So my
Mm.
4-year-old son just did not understand what was happening. Why can't I hug mom? One of the
Right.
most, oh gosh, the hardest time was I came back from being 2 days in the hospital, and he runs across the room to try and give me a big hug as soon as I walk in the door, and I had to scream and sort of push him away because I literally could not have taken a hug.
Oh,
And
how
that was
awful.
so awful. My 7-year-old, she was old enough to kind of know what was going on, but obviously not. And we did some age appropriate education for her. You kind of have to, I never wanted to hide anything from my children,
Right.
but making it age appropriate for her. And we did let her come to the hospital and, to have her see me in a vulnerable spot where I
Right.
was weak and injured or, in pain. I thought about it and I thought, I think that's a reality, and I have to show all sides when you're a mom of what's important and what's not. And it's also important to admit when you need help and when you're struggling.
Oh, I thank you. I appreciate you answering that. We're going to take a quick 30-second break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about your book and also how you can help others. We'll be right back.
Carol Graham would like to show you the path from misery to miraculous triumph in her fast-paced memoir, Battered Hope. She relates her determination to succeed as someone who experienced one horrendous nightmare after another. Gang raped and left for dead, loss of a child, husband falsely imprisoned, and cancer. Nothing could break her tenacity or faith. No matter what you face, heartache, loss, suffering, or injustice, Carol will illustrate how she became a victor the same way you can. The secret is to never, ever give up hope. Order your copy at Amazon or batteredhope.blogspot.com.
Well, I thank you, Erica, for what you have shared today with our audience regarding breast cancer and mastectomy. I've never heard it quite referenced this way before, in that you are proactive. And I think
Mm,
that's a real interesting concept. And I also believe that there are going to be many women who are going to be giving this some serious thought. And so for that, I thank you. Now,
yeah.
moving forward, anything else you want to share about your story and also your book?
Yeah. Well, I'll start with the book. As I mentioned, we talked about earlier how community is contagious. And after I had sort of maybe about 3 or 4 months after I had into my recovery, people, like I said, started to ask me questions. And I would often hear, again, a friend of mine at work is diagnosed. Would you mind talking with her? I've said, of course I will. And, so I'd be on the phone with a woman I've never met halfway across the country. And I also felt that responsibility. I said, not only did I coach that person and listen, but then I offered to send photos, right? Of like, hey, I want to be that person in the bathroom at work for you. I can't be with you, but I can text you these photos, right? And women found them so helpful. First, it was kind of funny to be sending, such vulnerable, intimate photos of
Right,
myself to
right.
near strangers. But I know, but the feedback I got from women was so positive, Carol. Right? Again, it's like the secret club. And so I felt
Yes.
like I was in this secret club where I was meeting these women again around the country who were friends of friends or neighbors and things like that. And we were exchanging stories and moments and pictures. And I thought, this is working and this matters. And again, women were saying, oh my gosh, you're the first person who can just tell me straight and tell me authentically and keep it real. And it happened so often, but I was like, okay, I can do this one at a time, but wouldn't it be more beneficial if I could really scale that opportunity? And so that's what made me think about putting it into a book because
Okay.
I felt a deep responsibility, to be honest, to pay it forward. I had been given so many gifts, starting with that woman in the bathroom at work. And then I just really valued the community I was creating inadvertently with these women around the country. And so I wrote the book and I got it published into the world. And I also can tell you now, there are still women that, again, friends of friends who get a hold of the book and say how valuable it is. But the most, I don't know, so the impactful is the people I have no connection to that still reach out and say how helpful this book was. It's a short book, Carol. You can read it cover to cover in probably about an hour and 10 minutes. And I have so many people that tell me that's what they do. They read it in one sitting because when you're diagnosed with breast cancer and you're newly deciding what to do, you don't have a lot of time. So I made the book
Right.
intentionally short. It's full of pictures. And kind of the interesting thing is, I also included a section on poetry in the book, which I almost cut because it's actually, when I say it's poetry, they're actually real life entries from my journal during my experience. And they were
Really?
so broken. Like my thoughts were so broken, my words were so broken. And when I pulled out my journal, a year later to try and write the book, I looked at it and I was like, oh my goodness, these are not even full sentences. They kind of read like poetry. So I wasn't sure if it would land for people. Um, but the feedback I've gotten, Carol, it's people's favorite part of the book. It is
Ah,
absolutely people's favorite part. And so it makes me laugh, right? The one thing that I was most afraid of, I was afraid
right,
of feeling, I was afraid of looking
right,
foolish. I
right.
was afraid of being too vulnerable. It's people's favorite part. So if you are now newly diagnosed or you know somebody who has been diagnosed or a friend of a friend, I highly encourage to get a copy of the book. It has been such a gift to be able to support so many women. That's my favorite part.
And how do people contact you?
So I have my website, which is my full name, ericanewbertcampbell.com. And you can Google that, or the book is available on Amazon. It's called The Mastectomy I Always Wanted. And I do recognize that's a title that would raise an eyebrow, and that's intentional.
Obviously, it raised mine.
Yep.
I
Yep.
appreciate that. Okay. All right. Well, is there anything else, any word of encouragement, any inspirational word, anything about anything that you would like to share before we
Yeah.
close?
Well, I'd say there's two other phrases that really I hold close to my heart. And one of them is trust the process. Trust comes up so often in a cancer journey. You have to, number one and above all, you have to trust yourself. You have to trust that inner voice that tells you what is right for you and what is the right decision, next step, whatever you need. That's a trust journey. But also trusting your care team. So I always encourage if you meet with a physician or a nurse practitioner, it's okay to get a second opinion until you find that person that you trust, because you are literally trusting that person with your life. Um, I say trust that process of finding the right care team for you. And again, it's not what your neighbor says, your husband says, your partner says, your coworker. It's what you say. And so I always want to talk about trusting yourself and trusting the process. And then, of course, my favorite one is never give up. You will have good days, you will have bad days, and sometimes they'll be in between days, but just continue to take that one step forward, never give up, and you will find yourself in a better place no matter what.
I like that. There'll be good days, there'll be bad days, and in between days. That's
Yep.
excellent. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, I thank you. Thank you, Erica. This has been great. I appreciate your energy and your clarity and your resilience, all those things that made you who you are to share this story. So again, we thank you and look forward to promoting this. And I know that it'll be an inspiration and a help to many people who are going through this experience or a similar one. So thank you for being on. Never,
Thank,
ever give up hope.
thank you so much, Carol, and thank you to all your listeners. And I love this. Never, ever, ever give up hope.
Okay.
Thank you for listening to Never Ever Give Up Hope, featuring Carol Graham. Did you know that most people succeed because they are determined to? Quitting was never an option. Carol loves your comments and will respond to each one. So please subscribe and review this podcast. A rating of 5 stars would be outstanding and appreciated. Remember, if you are still here, there is always hope.